This is such a lovely little medieval church. It's not very far from the old shop at all. And I come here quite often to look at the beautiful screen. It's one of the most beautiful in Norfolk, partly because it has never been touched up or repainted or anything. So the colours must look just as they did at the very beginning of the 15th century when it was first painted, only much more weathered. So you've got these beautiful, beautiful layers of colour and pattern, and the halos you'll see, and the tops of the bishop's croziers, I think they're called, are all beautifully ornate and gold. There are some unusual saints here as well, like the one we're looking at now. You can just see the back of his head, and that's a real giveaway as to who he is, if he didn't have his name plate underneath him, which he actually does have in a very spidery writing. He's called John of Bridlington, and it's the only depiction of him in the whole of England, or the only painting. He's in a few glass windows, but no one really knows why he's turned up in this little tiny church in rural Norfolk. But I've got a theory, and I've written an essay, actually, a little essay about it, my ideas. And the reason I came to the church on this day is because I wanted just to look at him again for that. And I finished the piece, and I have submitted it to a journal. So fingers crossed that they're interested in strange medieval saints. I mean, who knows? But meanwhile, as I'm already here, I thought you might like to have a look as well. I haven't been through saint by saint, but I think it's more the overall effect of them, really. You've got this beautiful patterning in the halos, and they're all most of them carrying their implements of torture, which is not always very pleasant. One of them's holding his head, but he's also got a head on his body as well, so that's quite surreal. Here we have St. Stephen with his stones and St. Lawrence with his gridiron, which you don't want to think about too much. And they're both wearing, as some of the other saints are, this beautiful pale otherworldly blue, which you hardly see on any other screens. Apparently it was extremely expensive to produce, so it was very rare. And it's really interesting to see an example of it, which again hasn't been painted over. But sadly, the very last panel, you can see a piece of plain wood, and it was of Saint Eligius, who is the patron saint of farriers. It was stolen in February 1982 when somebody just prized it off and took it away. It's only known from old photographs, but it's very, very sad. But at least we do have the rest of the beautiful screen, and I shall no doubt go and see it again before too long. It's a real treat to come down into Crow Wood, even though it's actually just at the end of the lane and across the lane. But more often than not, I just walk around a little almost circular walk over the heath and down to the stream and back, often quite quickly, because I've just got a few minutes or something like that before I'm doing something else, and it's just something really lovely to do, to reset and put things in perspective. And you always see something unexpected, whether it's an otter or a pair of goldcrests like I saw the other day, or a woodcock, or a little shrew running across your path, which happened to me a couple of days ago. You never know what's going to happen, and I think that's the excitement of going out of the garden and along the lane. But the sun was just so enticing as it got lower through the branches and was making the holly leaves sparkle as well, that I decided just to go across and have that circular walk around the wood. And I thought, while I was doing that, I would show you as well. And I haven't actually been there since the last time that we were there, so things have moved on. It's still looking very wintry, of course. It'll be a while before there are clumps of daffodils that you do get in this wood, but it's nice to see it as it becomes its lowest and its most bleached and most back to basics, I suppose you'd call it. All the leaves have, of course, gone and are rotting down and turning into fresh compost. And the water in the ditch is quite full, really. There's ice still, you can see there on the water, that lies quite primevally among the fallen trees and yeah, the way everything's been left, I love, because it's just how it would have been really in an unmanaged woodland centuries and millennia ago. It was so lovely to be able to go down to the water here and see that the irises, the yellow flags, are already just starting to poke their heads up above the surface of the water, despite the fact it's been frozen recently. And I was back on the track then. Another thing I could see was the some greenness where the honeysuckle has got its leaves and is twining around a lot of the trees already. It's always very early to do that. And all the time at the edges of the wood, you could see the light flooding in. It's still quite chilly though, as you probably can tell from looking at it. And then I looked across and I thought I could see cranes, but actually they weren't cranes at all, they were geese. Then on my way back out again and through the pine plantation, which always feels so different. But even that felt very light and bright and full of colour, and even a little bit of warmth as I walked back down through towards the lane and then back towards the old shop. It's been a beautiful winter day, and you can see some colour in the sky up there, as well as the scruffy outlines of some of the buildings here at the old shop. Just show you the smoke coming out of the chimney there, the wood smoke, which is the sight which makes it all worthwhile to me. The sky's been really blue today. It stayed a bit icy all day in places because it's that kind of weather at the moment. Where you think it's all defrosted, but actually there are lots of little pockets that the sun doesn't reach, and it's all crispy still. And you can see in the little forest, it's kind of quite transparent at the moment. You can see the hedge through, which my neighbour has been and cut, so it's looking much neater at the back. And I can't say the same of where the trees are here. But as we started to see last time we were out here, it really is clearer low down here, so you can start to see where things can be cleared, and some of the trees can be cut back and become a shrub layer. So that's something I'm going to do. I must admit it's been a little bit chilly for my fingers today to be out here. Lovely as it's been, I went for a walk and warmed up that way. But I've got one little job I'm going to do now, so I thought I would just show you what it is. It's the tiniest of jobs, but every little thing that you do does make you feel a tiny step closer as well to how I'd like it to manifest in the end. So what I've got here is a big white blob, is some trees. Now you might say, well, why does she need more trees when she's got all these trees? And in fact there are too many trees. I've got to thin them out and sort things out quite severely. But what they are is they're fruit trees, and obviously I do want to prioritise fruit, and I bought them in a sale in the summer. I've actually forgotten all about them, but because they're bare roots, they were going to be dispatching them in the bare root season, which is between November and March, and they arrived a few days ago. And luckily they're okay in the packaging for a few days, because I was a bit worried about taking them out into the frost and ice. But I've decided now is the time. I'm just going to heel them in. I don't know quite where they're going to go, so I can't actually give them permanent homes, but I think they'll be happy I just heeled into the ground. So I'll just show you the date I ordered them. There we are, you can see 8th of August, so no wonder I've forgotten about them. So they will hopefully add to our little family here in the garden, and the more you have, of course, the more they can pollinate each other. You'll find some from each of the pollination groups, so that will actually help the yield of all the other fruits. So it really is a good idea, if you can fit fruit trees in, to have more than one or more than two. I've dug a hole just here. I'm not sure whether it's going to be big enough or not, but I'll find out in a minute. I haven't seen them outside the packaging yet. This shrub next to where I'm healing them in is doing really, really well. It's one of these lovely winter flowering ones, which is fragrant, as they tend to be the winter flowering shrubs. And it's between that and this other one which we looked at last time, which is still flowering beautifully as well, this viburnum. I need to work quite quickly now because the light is fading, but it's a really exciting moment when you get the outer layers off. I know there's rather more plastic involved in this than would be my ideal choice, but you know, it is what it is. And once they're unpacked, they will have a new life here at the old shop, and hopefully they'll be very happy and put out lots of branches and lots of fruit. Here are those bare roots I've just uncovered, and you can see how good they look. Actually, they look really healthy and nice, those roots, but you don't want to leave them exposed for very long, so I should get them into the hole I've dug for them and just heal them all in together until I can work out where to put them, and they'll be much happier like that than in this bag. They're always cheaper than pot grown, and also they will establish faster because they get their roots straight in and they're away once the season begins. And these were actually in a sale anyway, I seem to remember, which is why I bought these particular varieties. They were reduced, and they've come from actually near Glastonbury at Castle Carey. So that's a Cambridge gauge. This one is a Williams pear. They're lovely, aren't they? And this one is a Tsar plum. And the other plum is Deniston's Superb. So I remember choosing them because they were different. They had different properties: cooking, eating, colour, that kind of thing. But over and beyond that, I don't remember. So that will be quite interesting. I think there should be another. Oh yes, there's a Burr Hardy pear as well. So there's 2 pears, 2 plums, and a gauge, which is a kind of plum really. Just look what I've spotted just before I start planting. Look. Aconites. Isn't that a wonderful sight? I remember when I was a little girl, we had quite a wild garden, and we had an old elm tree before Dutch elm disease, of course. And I remember the first flowers were always aconites, of course, and I remember going out every day to see if I could see them under the tree, and the excitement when they first appeared. And here are some now. You do get, of course, snowdrops at a similar time, but I always used to think the aconites were really the very, very first. And there could be lurking somewhere in this wild garden, not quite on it's kind of a scale of what we had when I was a little girl, because that was about a 60-year-old woodland, I suppose. The house was about 60 years old, but and this is about 2 years old. But nonetheless, there might be some snowdrops as well, because I did put some snowdrops in, so I'll look forward to bumping into them when I'm wandering around. The light's fading fast now, and it's getting a bit chilly, but I'll just show you. I'll pop them in, maybe pile a little bit of wood chip around them just to keep the roots warm. Regular viewers won't be surprised to hear that where I dug the hole there, it was just a complete mass of bindweed roots, which is, I suppose, not surprising. I don't know whether you remember, but this watering can here was completely obscured by, it was like a green watering can, because you'd hardly have known it was a watering can. It was so covered in bindweed in the summer. So it does look a lot better, but actually, of course, the roots are still lurking. So I'm not going to get too worried or think I've got to dig out every little scrap before I can do anything. I think I'll just kind of try and keep on top of it better this year whilst I'm doing the gardening, and just make sure it doesn't climb up everything. I think that's the best way, because you could drive yourself mad having to get every scrap of it out, and I haven't really got time for that. It's more important to garden for wildlife and to produce food here, and yeah, just really to make the most of it really, and also of course to share it with you if you'd like to watch. I was over on the heath yesterday and bumped into a woman who I know a little bit, who lives nearby, and she was telling me that the alder car is a site of special scientific interest, an SSSI, which I hadn't realised before, but it's not actually that surprising, I guess, because it's really interesting to see how the landscape would have looked in a valley bottom before the land was drained in the same way as it is now, and all these little channels made by farmers. A lot of streams wouldn't have looked like streams, they would have looked like this seasonally, and then little channels would flow where the land was lowest at certain times of year. So this is really almost like a prehistoric landscape we're looking at here. And of course it has its own wildlife as well associated with it. Anyway, until a little while ago, it was frozen solid down here, and then suddenly the temperature's risen really quickly, and it's all slushy, which hasn't really been happening. It's tended to stay icy all day when it's going to be icy. I can see on the surface a little tiny bit of ice. I'll just go a bit closer. Got my wellies on, so I'm all right. You never know, do you? Yeah, a bit squishy here. Anyway, I think you may be able to see that it's where it's more matte in colour, that is still ice, so it's not completely unfrozen. But this is a really typical January sight from ages past. And of course the fallen wood rots and the compost and underfoot becomes richer and richer, and these really strange shapes everywhere. And you can see how stories of the marshlands in particular would have grown up over the years. This is the furthest point on my walk, and I'm just about to go back to the old shop, but I thought you might like to see it on a fairly bleak January day. It's a quiet Sunday, and all the usual workaday sounds of agricultural activity and tractors and big lorries rumbling past are silent at the moment. Down here as well there are some lovely signs of spring. That's going to be a bluebell, and you can see lots more shoots actually between the leaves. I don't know if they're a bit too small to see, but these are some more shoots, and there's lots more. As soon as you get your eye in, there are lots and lots, and I think these are all bluebells going to come up here because it's a really nice place for bluebells on the edges. If you've seen the last few videos, you may remember we were looking at this sewing that I've been doing. It was intended to be an Advent project. I got it quite late on and didn't start it until something like 15th or 16th of December. The idea of it is it's something completely I say non-creative, but I mean I did it as a meditation rather than as a creative activity, in that it's all preordained what you're going to do, but every day is a surprise because you turn the page and you get another little project and all the patterns, and it tells you what to do basically, which I've really enjoyed being told what to do. It's been very, very restful and lovely meditation. The idea is that you do one little piece every day, like the squirrel is one project, for example, and the owl is a different day, and the hills were in a different day, and the houses were another day, and so on. But I'm either very slow or it was quite ambitious, because I didn't manage to do one every day at all, and I decided it didn't really matter in the end. I decided that I was going to just enjoy it. So the squirrel, for example, I remember turning over the page on Christmas Day, probably just after midnight on Christmas Eve, and finding it was the squirrel and being really pleased. But it took me probably 3 days after that to finish it in little bits and pieces. So I've just accepted it is what it is, and I had then given myself the deadline of Old Epiphany in the end, which I thought was loads of time, which was the 19th of January. And you've guessed it, here we are on the, well, as I'm recording this, it is the 23rd of January and I haven't finished. And I've made this decision now that I'm not going to try to finish now, because it feels as if the season is gradually going. I'm not going to say it's not winter anymore. I'm standing here in the kitchen, very, very chilly, but I still think that it would be quite nice to leave the rest of the little mini projects for Advent next year and have it ready to actually have up at Christmas time. So that was, even just today was the idea I had. And so what I thought I'd do is, for the last time, just show you the little bits I've done since we were last looking at it, and then I'm going to fold it up or roll it up and put it away and hopefully remember where I've put it next December. The bear holding a lantern, he was one project, and he wasn't there last time we looked, and nor were all the little lanterns with their flames in them hanging from the branches and from the tree trunks here. So they're new. They were quite fun to do, with their little silver flames and silver hanging kind of hanging loops. And I think, I'm not sure of anything else up there. I think we had done the owl probably. But the other one, who's definitely new, is this badger, because I just did him today, and it was doing, as I finished the badger, sleeping badger, I thought, I think the time has come to give it now, just put it away gently and bring it out again next December. So if you're still watching next December, and perhaps you could give me a nudge if I haven't remembered to get it out. Whether you can tell me where it is another matter, because I don't know myself yet quite where I'm going to put it. There's lots of ongoing sorting and clearing to do at the old shop, so there's no obvious place yet, but I'm sure I'll find somewhere. I realise I haven't shown you the two newest inhabitants at the old shop, or the old shop's garden. A few weeks ago at the local auction I bid for a lot which was some garden ornaments, but I actually only wanted two of them, and it's this one, this little chap, little duck, and there's another one a little further along the garden which I'll show you in a minute, and they've just been outside somewhere for such a long time. They're covered in moss, which I love, and I just took the two that I wanted in the end, but the lot only cost me £4 in total, so I was well pleased with that. So I'm not sure that Hills is exactly there in relation to the pond once I get tidying up along this edge, but somewhere in this area anyway, and I'll just show you the other one. And here we are. This was the one I particularly was drawn to. It's a fawn, and again covered in moss, obviously been outside somebody's house for a long time, so I'm just delighted to have been able to give him or her, not sure with this one, maybe this is a her, a home at the old shop. And at the moment I've just placed her in the leaf mould here. Again, it's part of the garden I haven't worked on yet for this. Well, not that you have to do a lot at this time of year, but you know, eventually I should be tidying and cutting back and things like that. But that's for another day, and I'm hoping they'll nestle happily into their homes here.